Welcome to another episode of the Odd Fellows Oddcast. Today we're going to be discussing a pretty hot topic on social media. We've talked about this a good deal, and so this particular podcast may get a lot of people's attention and views as a result. And we'll be talking about the non-discrimination policy that the Odd Fellows put into place and how it affects our lodges. As someone who is in a lodge that we had fewer members, and when I came in we have more members, and so I've been inviting friends to be a member, and one of those friends happens to be my friend Wes Hagen, who is a raconteur. He is a really great storyteller, and he makes and sells wine, and he's a really great guy. I'm glad to call him a friend. And thanks, Wes, for being here. And joining me also is one of my regular guests on the show, which is Peter Sellers, who is a past Grand Master and past Grand Patriarch, and is also a representative to Sovereign Grand Lodge. And Wes, I'm sure you have no idea what that really means.
Sounds pretty fancy. If I've worn a tie, I don't know.
No. Hey, I'm wearing thermals.
There you go.
Also joining us is Rick Boyles. Rick is as you can see from all of the books in his corner there, he is a very studious man and knows a lot about words and how they can definitely impact things. And we'll be talking a little bit about the policy, and Rick knows policy and he knows rules and laws that the Odd Fellows have. And not to say that Peter doesn't, because Peter is also someone who has written a lot of those policies that we currently run our lodges by. So I just want to open things up and invite Peter to kind of give us a bit more of a background on how we ended up where we are today. And then I'll talk a bit about how it is that Wes is on this podcast. Besides the fact that he's my friend, we'll be talking a bit more about that. So go on, Peter, and set us up and let us know, why are we where we are?
Off the cuff, I just want to echo what you said. This is probably the most heated topic in the order. In fact, when it comes up year after year on jurisdictional levels in California or Sovereign Grand Lodge, it is very divisive. It's probably the most debated topic we have, and it's quickly put to rest each time because it's so argumentative. And to some, I'm going to start off by saying, when I joined the order, I didn't join a church. I didn't join to go to church. I joined the order to join a fraternal organization where at that time it was men only, and we could come together and we could meet and we could do good works. That's why I joined the order. I didn't come to say prayers. I didn't go there to set out Bibles. I didn't go there to talk about Jesus Christ and anything religion related. I came there to meet with, it was sold to me to come there as a fraternal brother. And over the years, I've always questioned, why does it feel like I'm going to church? And fortunately, I could get away with more by being in San Francisco, where my lodge is located. For years, we sort of skirted that subject. And we were very happy in the year 2018 when we had to put the non-discrimination policy into our bylaws and into our code book, which forced us to not discriminate any longer. And that included religion, your belief on religion or not. So that's it's sort of vague to a lot of members nationally. And they don't know whether or not, does this mean we have to keep a Bible in the lodge? Because I can tell you what's always been in our code of general laws, and this is new to one of our guests, but we're not allowed to put religious symbols in our lodge rooms. That's in the code. It's always been in the Code of General Laws. You cannot have religious symbols in your lodge. To me, the Holy Bible is a religious symbol. So we're contradicting ourselves as an order, and we've always have done that. So for me, it was better not to bring up the subject. And in my lodge, this is very controversial. And, I really don't care what people say to me. I can take it or leave it, but we don't bar you if you tell us you're an atheist. We won't bar you if you tell us you're an agnostic. And especially now, especially since we entered the non-discrimination policy. And I can tell you, Sovereign Grand Lodge is trying to catch up again, because when it last met in 2019, there was a bill introduced on the last morning, and it didn't come to the floor. It'll come to the next session unless the makers of the bill pull it. And now what it says, and so few people knew about this because they had already left. It was on the last morning. This was in North Carolina. And this is what they're trying to put into the order. Belief in the existence of a supreme being who is a creator and preserver of the universe is an integral requirement to hold membership in this order. Atheism and agnosticism, both of which are a denial, disbelief, or inability to believe with certainty that the existence of a supreme being, as previously mentioned, are both incompatible with membership in this order. So what they're trying to do with this bill, they're trying to reintroduce this restrictive language to say you're an atheist. By introducing that bill, by needing this bill to pass, it also tells us, because it hasn't passed yet, that the door is open. That's what it tells me as a representative. Otherwise, why write it? Why present the bill? And I won't go into who wrote it, but why present the bill to a representative like me? Because it hasn't passed. It hasn't come to the floor yet. So at this time, the door is open. It's open to all people. As I said, my lodge has never set the barrier anyway, because I doubt you're going to pull the charter of a lodge with nearly 300 members. And then my family and my friends are spread throughout this jurisdiction. It would cripple this order to prevent people from joining. But then again, thank you for allowing me to speak first.
Sure.
As I said, it's not an easy topic. Rick can tell you, a few years ago, there was a bill in there to take out the Lord's Prayer during the meeting in California. You should have seen how many people lined up in line behind that microphone saying they would never stay in the order if we remove the Lord's Prayer.
Right.
Well, we do something differently in my lodge. We will have a moment of 2 minutes of silence
instead
during
of a prayer.
that time, or the ritual states you'll have a Holy Bible out there, but it doesn't prevent you from putting the other denominational books out there as well. So if you ever come to my lodge, which some of you have, we have over 25 denomination books on an altar in the center of the floor. So it didn't matter what your belief was. And one of those, they deal with everything, even witches. I mean, it would everything you find in the military on those headstones is what we have on the center of our floor in our lodge room. So with that, there you go.
Yes, that puts us, kind of where we are. Now, my lodge is considerably different. I want to give Rick an opportunity to weigh in on this, but just as a note of contrast, our lodge, the Bible is open. It's the only book there. And also too, we have the Lord's Prayer, and, most of the lodges across the country, around the world, they're pretty much the same way. And it's nice that I think a lodge itself has the ability to do things a little differently as long as it, kind of goes by the code. But part of the problem here, and this is where Wes comes in, is that when he was asking me about a shirt that I was wearing that had my Oddfellows logo on it, he's a really great researcher. He's a super knowledgeable guy. And he went and did some research, and he saw how it says, even today on the internet, it says one of the requirements is that you have to have a belief in a supreme being. So my friend Wes tells me, he's like, hey, that's not for me if that's the requirement. And Rick, I want to, maybe I should just go to Wes and just ask you, Wes, what was that like for you, having to see that and having to deal with that? Because I feel like, if Oddfellows has a non-discrimination policy, that certainly could be considered discrimination towards you if you don't feel that is something that you would answer positively.
We all have choices. We all have choices in this world where we want to spend our time, our effort, and our agency. Where I want to spend my agency and find a fraternal order moving in. I'm 51 years old. I'll be 52 in just a little bit, and I plan to live a lot longer. And I'm going to have a lot of energy once I'm not out there selling wine and I'm retired. Whenever I choose and whenever I have the opportunity to join a fraternal order, I will be the first generation in my family for 7 generations that does not have a Presbyterian minister in it. I grew up in the Presbyterian church. I was confirmed. I was a Christian as a young man. I was a Christian, and around 17, I started studying comparative mythology and came to the idea, much like Spinoza, that to claim that you know what God is and what he wants is generally more of a projection of what you want. I think Spinoza said, if triangles had a God, it would necessarily have 3 sides. I think that's a pretty good idea. So I want to be careful, not only to respect people's faith, because I am not out here to ruin faith. I'm interested in epistemology. I'm interested in truth, but I'm also interested in human flourishing. So if I can find an order or a group that goes out into the world and that makes a difference. I'm also, like I said, I'm probably the only generation going back as long as I can imagine that is not a Rotarian. My family is full of Rotarians, and I have been asked by 4 different Rotary organizations to join when I go and speak at these Rotary organizations. And I tell them quite honestly, because of the religious nature of this, I love what you do. I love how you help. But I think there's a lot of people out here. And remember, if you look at the demographics, we're going to be looking at almost a third of the United States within 20 years that is going to have no claim to any religious order. So religiosity is probably, I don't see any growth in really focusing on religiosity. What I see is, we live in a plural society. We were basically formed as a nation by secular people and deists. And to the idea that you will have to make a theist claim to be able to enter into an organization is an absolute deal breaker for me.
Yeah. Now, I just want to point something out. Oddfellows is always looking for like really good people, people that want to make a difference, people that want to be involved in the community. The other requirement is, you got to be faithful to your country, that sort of thing. So, we're looking for people like Wes. We're looking for people that want to make a difference. And Oddfellows was started in the United States over 200 years ago. Before that, it was, nearly a century in England. Rick, just want to shoot this question to you. Considering Wes's situation here, where he doesn't want to say, yeah, I believe.
Right.
Do you really think that it's on the benefit of the order? Is it for the good of the order to turn somebody like Wes away?
Absolutely not. In fact, I agree with both Peter and Wes that we have to be more forward thinking in order to go any much further in the order. I've done a study on the history of fraternal groups in the United States, and you can bring up Wikipedia, and it's just littered with fraternal orders that have failed that were secular, that were devoted to a certain line of religion. And the longer we just hone to one line of religion, the more sure we're going to fail. We need to open up to all walks of life. And to me, that's what the non-discrimination statement is all about. I don't know why we're going back and having legislation written to limit the to open up discrimination again. It's crazy.
Well, that's true. Yeah, and I just want to point out that, like, as an example, the YMCA was a fraternal organization that was started, some 100 years ago, and the C in YMCA was actually for Christian. So, it's not like we can't change and grow if we were to, completely stay non-discriminatory, as the YMCA has obviously done. You don't think of them as a Christian organization, and
That's right.
that's how they got started. So, Peter, just back to you a little bit. What advice do you have for someone like myself in my lodge? Because this whole podcast idea came up because I have another friend who was interested in Odd Fellowship. I actually, gave him a tour of my lodge, and he was very interested. And then, suddenly he tells me, "Hey, man, this thing has got this religious requirement. That's not really for me." So I got two really good friends of mine who, it's not like I'm associating with, a bad element. I mean, I pick my friends very carefully. Wes is a really smart guy. He's got a good heart, kind of person I think would be in Odd Fellows. So Peter, what do you find about people that are not Christian in your lodge? Do you think that they add something? Because one thing I do know for sure, all of the people who I've ever met who are, professed atheists are some of the most thoughtful people I've ever met, and also too far more moral than some of the Christians that I know. So do you think that allowing people that would say no to Odd Fellows in your lodge that may be atheists or they may be agnostics, do you think they add something that might be missing otherwise?
I know that's a rhetorical question, but of course they add something because we have them. We welcome them in our lodge, everybody. It doesn't matter what your religion is, but I'm going to talk about your situation.
Mm-hmm.
You're not the only lodge, but on the other hand, Rick and I aren't the only people, and you yourself aren't the only people in this order who feel this way, who want to open the doors to everybody. And I actually open the door. We do in my lodge, not I, but I think my wife's over here laughing because she knows my answer it isn't acceptable to everybody. But I've been here before. I was a member in the order for a few years before we allowed women in. I've been here, and one of my first things, the first year, I was criticized because I supported women coming in the order in the year 2000, and 2000 came around, and I endured such criticism from an all male organization that I brought 42 women in the first year. Okay, I shoved it down their throats. Now, I talked to the women beforehand. I go, "You guys are barrier breakers," and the same thing I did for blacks and the people, other minorities. So I've been here for years, and I'm not, politics aside, I'm a progressive when it comes to the lodge because I recognize what the order needs. It needs good people. It needs people who are willing to volunteer, people who want to do good things, regardless whether or not what their belief is, their personal belief outside the lodge.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the lodge is not my church. And if a bill like this is going to pass, what if let's say, okay, I'm a Christian. I started out as a Christian in this order. What if over the years I became like Wes and I had an enlightenment or an epiphany that, hey, you know what? I don't know if God exists. because I went through a lot of hard times. It's hard for me to believe it in God. What if I changed after 25, 30 years and I've been a grandmaster and I've been a pastor. I've done everything in this order. I've written books about this order. I've written your laws about this order. I mean, I've done everything. What if my beliefs have changed? And that's something I throw back to people. And so what, you're going to call me a non-odd fellow and kick me out?
Yeah, they'll
You
have
know,
a witch hunt for
that,
all of
that,
those people that don't
but
believe.
they, and going back, I don't think they realize how many people we are talking about here. I mean, you're going to lose your order. That we will lose our order if we backstep. And we might as well backstep and kick women out. We might as well backstep and kick blacks out. And then Asians. That's pretty harsh to say. That's pretty hard to do. The same thing applies to here. So when you don't allow everyone in, you might as well say you're doing that as well. You're being prejudiced and you're being racist and you're being discriminatory when you keep people out of our lodges. And I will put my name to that statement. And that's what the best way to do this is in those seminars. Every seminar we have, I always tell everyone the same thing. I did not join this order to join a church. And I tell the entire audience that. And then that's it. That's my belief. Now, when I leave the lodge, if I want to go to church on Sunday or Saturday or whatever day I want to go on, whatever my belief is, that's fine. But I'm not going to be discriminatory in my lodge. And that's my statement. So if somebody like you comes to me and tell me you want to bring Wes in your lodge, great. I'm all for it. I don't want Wes. And if somebody ever disrespects Wes or says something derogatory, they're going to hear it from me because we have a lot of members. And, I don't want to say the lodges, but there's another lodge here that probably doesn't have any Christians in it, but I don't want to tell you what lodge that is, but it's a little more east of our lodge in San Francisco. And anyway, but on the other hand, great. I respect your belief. I respect your belief. Go do what you need to do. But again, I'm going to say, until they change the Code of General Laws, the Bible is a religious symbol, whether they want to believe it or not. Now, I'm okay with our degrees being based on Old Testament or first and second degree. I'm okay with that because those are lessons. And you might hear the word God or, you may hear those terms. That I'm not really putting in the category of believing in a supreme being or believing in a God, but to hear those lessons about friendship, about love, truth. Well, it's basically friendship and love, but in those 2 degrees. But those don't offend me, and I'm okay with those. But I'm again, how do you break that viewpoint down in your lodge where you have more recalcitrant members? And I mean that in a respectful way, if that could be respectful, but again, I don't, because I see that again as being discriminatory. I don't tolerate that, not in the lodge. So again, it's to hit them from the side. Let them hear those seminars. I believe you've had a couple of those members in those seminars where I do say things, and I'm hoping to break down those beliefs. And again, we're in a more friendlier region of the United States, more laxed, more liberal, and a sense of allowance, as opposed to what we see in the Midwest. As your grand representative, if they heard this conversation, which some may, they will be very upset. But I'm not asking them to be upset. I'm asking them to be open-minded. Again, this order is leveling out. It is decreasing, leveling out in some areas. We can't afford to lose potential productive members who want to join. members like our potential applicants like Wes.
Mhm.
We don't want to lose them. Rick has known people. I have known people. I've been in your position where people have asked me, no, come on over, be a barrier breaker for me. And once you get in, I'll tell you the way I brought a 16-year-old in California. It's age too. I brought a 16-year-old in several years ago. Is a young girl used to come in with her grandparents, and she always had to sit inside the kitchen, and wait for the meetings to be over. And one day, come on in. You want to join? When she turned 16, I brought her in the lodge. We made her our color bearer, and she was in the lodge. She got her degrees, and I wrote the legislation the following year for California. And what are you going to do? Kick her out? She's already had her degrees.
Mhm.
And there was some opposition. When the vote came, we allowed 16-year-olds to
Yeah.
come in California.
Yeah.
So
And
that's the way it has to work. You have to kind of push.
mhm. Yeah, and this is, one of the really great things about being in a lodge is that, a majority of people, whenever we vote on something, we all agree to respect that particular vote. So, if I were to, in my lodge, call for a vote and avoid the question of whether or not you believe, then that is something that as long as we all, agree to abide by it, then we can, make that kind of a change. Rick and Peter have kind of pointed out that because of we have this non-discriminatory policy, we shouldn't even be asking that question. And what's worse to me, in general, Oddfellows have a rule. We don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion in our lodges. And as far as, this legislation goes, you would think that that would be something that wouldn't even be allowed to be talking about it because it goes against the basic idea that talking about these things causes division. And there has been so much division over this particular issue about religion. And we're not even really supposed to be talking about it because we're Oddfellows. And yet here we are. We've got this very clear policy to not, discriminate based on religion. And if you go and do any research like you did, Wes, you saw that like there's this requirement about religion. Well, unfortunately, talking with my lodge about giving up those older conservative, classic, ways of doing things that, 200 years ago, there were less than 1% of people in the United States were atheists. Obviously, that percentage has increased. I'm not saying you're an atheist, Wes, but I mean, it's just a general trend, and it's not going to shrink. So we should think about that. Yes, Wes or Peter.
Hey, I just want to point out that
Sure.
the non-religion and non-political discussion is only during meetings,
During
and that's in
meetings.
the ritual.
Mhm.
This is allowable.
Yeah, well, for us, not in a meeting, yes.
We wouldn't bring this up during a meeting. You could
Right.
not do that if we're following the ritual.
Right.
But this is allowable. This is an open discussion, and frankly, it's a good place to share an opinion. It's how do you get to the bottom of things if you don't talk about them?
No,
And
I agree completely.
I might amplify a little on what Peter mentioned. Our state is far and away the biggest state in the union. And one of the reasons for that is we are open to all walks of life, all beliefs. And if we start to put a stranglehold on that kind of action, we're just doomed.
Mhm. Now, Wes, I know that I mentioned to you something about this, and that is that even if we didn't have this question, and even if you were not asked, believe or whatever, during our lodge meetings, we still have the Lord's Prayer, and it's not much different than if you go to like City Hall and they have their meetings and they open up with a prayer, and it's like, well, it's kind of like everywhere. You have Pledge Allegiance and that sort of thing. It's kind of common. I'm sure that for anybody who is an atheist or whatever you consider yourself to be, you just kind of accept that. It's like, okay, well, you'll respect their way they do things as long as you have the same respect coming back to you, right? And as Peter was mentioning, there is a little bit of things here and there that kind of come from the Bible, and I think that as somebody who has some tolerance towards people that are religious, that you would have enough toleration for that, right?
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. No, I've read I actually gave up atheism for Lent a few years ago, and decided within the normal Lent period that I would read every major religious writing. So I read the Upanishads, I reread the Old Testament, the Torah, I reread the Synoptic Gospels. All of these things were so important to me. I read the Noble Eightfold Path of Buddha. Basically went in and tried to read just about everything that I could. So I understand. I read religious books as if they were poetry and not as a newspaper. And as long as it's not said to me, this is what you have to believe. Believe me, I grew up, playing tic-tac-toe with my brother in church, surrounded by people with white hair. I didn't feel like that was my culture. I didn't feel like it necessarily spoke to me. I'm not a huge fan of Iron Age poetry. But it has something to give to people. And from a poetic sense, I think the Bible is can be a great sense of wonder and of all these things. So it doesn't really bother me. I mean, obviously, I go to events where there are convocations and that type of thing. I try to look at it as we live in a plural society. I can listen to this. Of course, I don't have to make any claims. For me to make a claim that I believe there is a being that moves the universe and created this universe, that I would have a very, very difficult time with. And just to define what I actually am, I would consider myself a secular humanist. Mm-hmm. The idea that the greatest goal in life, and that's what I would ask you guys, when you look at your organization, what is the goal? Is the goal to create a Christian nation? Is the goal to create more Christians? Or is the goal to create people that want to engage in their own community and make those communities better, to provide services, to provide care? And if what I'm going to be looking for, and to be honest, I've got a fair amount of energy and a fair amount of resources to add to the organization that I choose once I have the time and the wherewithal to really dig in and engage. Whatever organization ends up being, I've got energy, I've got some things to add. And I guess I would ask, from an outsider looking in, which is honestly sometimes going to be the clearest view. Mm-hmm. I would ask myself the fundamental question: why Oddfellows? Why is it even there? And once you have an answer to that, why Oddfellows, then I think you can. Then I think, and I really want to tell Peter that I respect his strengths and I respect his ability to focus in and say, this is what I think, this is how we move forward. And if you don't like that, well, that's your problem, because I have a strong lodge with a strong belief that we are here to help human beings and not believe in one of the 2,500 gods invented by men, specifically.
Mm-hmm.
At least not in the lodge room. and then also to perform, and one thing to answer to you, Wes, I would, you probably got some idea from, there are lodges like Davis Lodge and other lodges that have a wealth of activities in their communities. And we're a mutually beneficial society where we help our own too. And we're just not elitist. We have several homeless members in my lodge as well. And we do help each other. Like this week, we've been giving away clothes to our members. For Christmas, we did a sock drive for the homeless in San Francisco's community, where the members came together and donated money for socks, where I actually went to Walmart and used all the money to buy all the socks I could. And that's the number one requested item for homeless people. So each lodge, hopefully, each lodge does things in their own communities. I've seen lodges like up in Forest Hill, set up a table with water for when the marathoners run through town. They can just grab the water, the bottled water free, you know. That small of an idea, a good intention, a great idea, that's small to something that's so humanely accepted to help homeless, you know, and feeding them as well. There's lodges that work the food lines. There's lodges that do so much from lodge to lodge. We're not universal. That could be a good thing. Again, we're not all the same. Some lodges are in more affluent areas. Some are in more depressed areas. So it just depends on for me, it's what you make your lodge and what you choose. I always ask the new member, what's your hobby? What do you like to do? What would you like to see us do? Give me one event. And we can't try all your ideas, but we'll give one event, and every member who comes up with an idea, we try that idea. That's how we open it up.
Yeah, and I want to make sure, and I want to let Rick speak as well, but I think it's really important for me to say that, of course, I have good Christian friends who's, and again, what does your belief, how does it bear fruit?
Yeah,
and if as long as we're all bearing fruit, we're all part of the same tree.
There you go.
Bless the Christians.
I want you. Come on, join my lodge.
Let's go. Let's make this world a better place. There's suffering, and until there's no suffering in this world, there will always be suffering. But of course, we can do whatever we can to try to limit it and to try to make our own communities better places and a place that we all want to live. I strongly believe that we should. My focus is, you know, let's make Earth, you know, heaven for our kids, because we know it's real.
Well, there you go. There are lodges right now who would embrace you and take you right in, and they wouldn't even ask you any questions. But unfortunately, going back to Joseph, I know Rick's got some things to say on this, and I should hold off a little bit. But Joseph's situation is more typical than not, I believe.
It is.
I think I didn't do a measurement, but you can tell by the number of lodges growing. I would say about 60% of our lodges are in your situation, Joseph, where you have older members who have been brought up that way and who have been reluctant for change. You won't even see the changes that I mentioned earlier that should have changed 30 years ago or even 20 years ago. And that is sad. And those lodges are suffering and they are dying. But the lodges who have opened up, and Rick can echo this, they're flourishing. They're doing well. Because
I would add that we really have to look at the history of all fraternal orders and what's happened. And the basis for many fraternal orders was different avenues of religion. And it's sad to think that we're going to go back in that direction. And just to do that segments the possible population we could draw into our lodges. And I forget whether it was Wes or Peter that mentioned, but half the population is probably now not Christian, not Catholic. Yeah. So, I mean, to believe in a supreme being, and who is a supreme being? I mean, are we going to define that too? And are we going to judge the levels of belief? Are we going to start passing tests for everybody to pass? So.
Yeah, I know that some time ago, I think it was about 15 years ago, there was a study that said that more than 50% of the US population believes that there's more than one way to get to heaven, which is kind of an odd question if you consider, what possible religions they may be thinking of whenever they answer that question. But, being able to see that there's more than one way to get to heaven on earth is, I think, a very pluralistic thing. We're a pluralistic society. I think that Oddfellows should certainly consider that. And also, too, I was thinking about the things that we do. Those are not Christian things, purely Christian things. Doing things for your community, doing things for homeless people. Sure, Christians can say, we do those things, but it is not something that belongs to Christians alone or to people who believe in a supreme being.
That's correct.
Well, listen, guys, I don't know if you want to make any kind of closing statements. You're welcome to do that before I sign off. But I want to thank all of you guys for being here. And I'm really glad that we were able to put this together. And I think this came out very nicely. So thank you for your contributions and your participation in this podcast today. You guys want to say anything as a closing note? Anybody?
Please
I'll
go
just
ahead.
say I'd like to thank you for allowing me to share my opinion. And I'm just happy to see this topic come up again. And it's a non-threatening platform, which I do enjoy. Now the viewer, it's a viewer's discretion whether or not they want to watch this. So if they watch this through, more power to you. And maybe you learned something. Maybe your lodge will become more progressive and start to grow. That's my statement.
Exactly.
I would just like to thank you guys for having me on. Thank you for your service. Thanks for that. And thank you for Joseph for helping me. To be honest, I knew you guys existed, but I really didn't know the history and everything else. It goes all the way back, to through England, and one of the most successful fraternal organizations, and one that was really, really important, and that can really be important. The one thing I would say from an outsider looking in, I would just say that understanding that there are people that are religious, that aren't religious, that are semi-religious, and everywhere in between, have something to add and a voice that can make you guys relevant into the 21st century and beyond. So I would suggest, if you're interested in keeping the attention of the world and to being a robust service organization and fraternal organization, and I suppose sorority also with ladies in there as well.
Right.
Just understand that there are people that do pay attention to these bylaws and make decisions as a result.
Yeah, and I know that there's still a lot of, even though we have this non-discrimination policy that's firmly in place, there are plenty of places on the internet that say that, you've got this this religious requirement exists, and it's like, well, if anybody who's doing research, then they need to understand that that's an old policy, and we should really do a good job of cleaning that up off the internet, that it's no longer a requirement. But at least if we honor this non-discrimination policy. So listen, guys, thank you so much. I definitely appreciate your time. And if you're watching this, I hope that you got something out of it. And make sure that you click subscribe so you can see our future Oddfellows Oddcasts. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you.
Thank